The first time Ada heard the bark, it didn't sound like a dog. It was low, almost a groan, tucked deep into the wind that spun off the back fields and hissed through the dry walnut trees. The sky was orange-black, not dusk, not yet night, and smoke pressed flat against the horizon like someone had laid a blanket over the hills. She stood barefoot on the gravel, staring at the edge of her home where flames chewed quietly through the roof beams. And for a full 3 seconds, she thought the sound had come from inside the fire. Then it came again, rougher this time. Torn from a throat unused to using itself, Ada turned slowly. The dog was there, not running, not barking like animals do in panic or instinct, just standing at the edge of the clearing near the barn's shadow, his head low, his front paws stiff and wide, as if he wasn't sure what to do with them. Smoke light swirled around him, making his fur patchy, mud-colored, graying at the shoulders seemed to flicker. His eyes never left hers. She hadn't given the mutt a name that had been part of the understanding. He came and went as he pleased, sometimes gone for weeks, sometimes appearing at dawn like he'd never left. She left food out near the fence post by the compost pile, never tried to leash him or touch him. In 8 years, she'd never once heard him bark until now. The flames cracked behind her, a window shattered inside the farmhouse. Ada didn't turn around. The dog's mouth opened again. A sound came out dry, broken, like it had rusted shut over the years and was forcing itself open. He took 2 hesitant steps forward, then another. His body twitched undecided, not afraid, not tame either, just waiting. She realized then that the old dog was staring past her. Ada turned her head. Down the slope, past the corner of the burning porch, was the hen house, and beyond that shadows moving near the tree line. She squinted. 2 shapes, no 3, too large for foxes, too silent for deer, moving low to the ground. The dog barked again, louder this time, not panicked, but sharp, directed. He swung his head toward the dark and gave one short, cutting sound that echoed across the parched grass. Whatever was there stopped moving. Ada stepped back. Her heel caught on a stone, and she steadied herself with a breath she didn't realize she was holding. The dog didn't flinch. His body had shifted, not toward her but between her and the distant tree line. She felt the heat from the fire finally reach her skin. The roof was starting to cave. "Go," she whispered, not sure who she meant. The wind had shifted again, and ash began to fall like dirty snow. The dog moved, not toward the woods, not toward the barn or the road. He circled wide, methodical, steady, the way you'd expect a border collie to herd cattle. He didn't run. He positioned, one eye always on her, the other on the shadows beyond the henhouse. And then he growled, a real growl, nothing like the bark from before. It was low, dangerous, the kind of sound that told you there were bones under his ribs, that remembered what wolves had once done. Ada didn't move. A shape broke from the trees fast, too fast, too fast. Long body, heavy tail. A cougar, young, reckless. It stopped just short of the fence line and stared, calculating. Behind it, 2 more shapes lingered, not close, not far. The dog didn't retreat. His shoulders squared, fur bristling just enough to catch the embers in the air. A minute passed, maybe less, maybe more. Then without a sound, the cougar turned, walked back into the trees. The others followed. The wind fell still. The only sound was the fire. The dog didn't look at her, didn't bark again. He stood there until the last flame fell through the roof. Then he turned, slow and stiff, and disappeared behind the barn. Ada stayed where she was, smoke on her skin, sweat running down the back of her neck, breath catching in her chest. She thought of the years she'd fed him, never expecting thanks, never asking where he went or what he remembered. And now, the night her house burned, he had finally barked. But not for her. By morning the house was a black husk, no smoke, just steam rising from the frame where rain had begun to fall quiet. Reluctant drops that slid off scorched rafters and pooled in the hollow place where the kitchen used to be. Ada stood in her field jacket, collar turned up, boots sinking into soft ash where gravel used to crunch. He hadn't slept. Not really. She'd drifted off in the cab of her truck with one leg curled under her, a wool blanket over her shoulders, and the window cracked an inch. When she woke, her mouth tasted like rust, and her arms ached from how tightly she'd held them across her chest. The dog was nowhere to be seen. She tried not to look for him. Instead, she moved slowly through the wreckage. Her boots nudged pieces of her old life, half-melted spoons, a cracked mason jar, the outline of a skillet burned into the stovetop. The porch had collapsed entirely. The only thing left standing was the wrought iron bell on the side beam, still dangling from its bracket like it was waiting for breakfast to be called. The hens were gone, coop door torn off its hinges, not by fire, by force. A pile of feathers told most of the story, but not all of it. Tracks in the mud suggested chaos, and then something strange, an other set of paw prints. Not cougar dog, bigger than she remembered. She followed them. The prints veered away from the coop and circled back behind the barn. There, the grass was pressed down in a wide arc, as if something large had bedded down, something that didn't care about being seen. And in the center, left behind with almost deliberate precision, was one of her rubber gloves, right hand palm up. Ada crouched slowly. The glove was clean, Not just dry but rinsed, as if someone had dipped it in the creek and placed it here. The fingers curled slightly from the damp. She didn't touch it. The rain grew steadier, falling in thin lines across the barn roof. She stood and turned, scanning the tree line. And there he was at first. She thought it was just the wind animating the brush, but no, he was there, half hidden behind a buckthorn cluster, eyes visible through the bramble. The old dog, watching his posture, was strange, not relaxed, but not afraid either. His head tilted slightly, as if he wasn't sure whether to come closer or disappear again. Mud clung to his chest. One of his legs, left front, held at a stiffer angle than usual. Ada didn't move. The dog stepped forward, then paused. His ears twitched, not toward her, but toward something else, farther down the ridge, and then she heard it too, a bleat, sharp, panicked young. The neighbor's goats. Ada started toward the sound, boots slipping in the damp grass. Behind her she heard movement, quick and rhythmic. The dog had followed. Down the slope, the landscape opened into a shallow gully lined with chokecherry and rusted wire fencing. And there, caught against a broken fence post, was a kid, tiny legs flailing, stuck in the wire. The mother stood nearby, stomping nervously, unable to help. And 20 feet beyond them, moving low through the grass, was the cougar. Same one, long tail, sun-bleached spine, that same young recklessness. But now it wasn't prowling, it was circling. The dog growled once and bolted. Ada yelled, but it was no use. He was already in motion, not headlong, not stupid. He veered left, drawing the cat's eye away from the goat. The cougar stopped mid-step, turned, hesitated, then sprang. The impact sent both animals tumbling sideways, out of sight behind a rise. Ada scrambled down, nearly tripping over the wire. The kid bleated again. By the time she reached the hilltop, the fight had already broken. Not clean, not over, just broken. The cougar limped away into the trees, blood at its haunch, jaw snapping at empty air. The dog stood panting, one shoulder slick and matted, ribs heaving. His eyes never left the place where the predator had vanished. Ada approached slowly. This time, he didn't retreat. His leg was worse than it had looked. Not fresh, old wound reopened. Maybe from the night before, maybe from something farther back. She crouched, said nothing. He turned his head to her just briefly and then looked away. Not asking, not refusing, just accepting. The rain kept falling, soft and steady. It misted the tops of the grasses and turned the dog's fur a darker shade. Ada reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out an old bandana, blue faded. She didn't know what she meant to do with it. Just that it was something. The dog let her tie it around his leg. Not tight, just enough to hold. They sat there, together, under the rusted trees, the quiet pressing in. Ada looked back toward the house. She had the feeling, sudden and unmistakable, that the fire hadn't been the beginning of something, but the middle. That the dog hadn't come to her land by chance. That the years she'd fed him had not been acts of charity, and that she had never, not once, asked what debt he was paying. Behind them, the kid bleated again, a fragile, repetitive sound. Dog stood, slow and deliberate. He didn't look at her. He walked toward the sound. The dog reached the kid before she did. He moved with a strange mixture of grace and fragility. His gait lopsided now, favoring the injured leg without surrendering to it. The kid, still pinned by the twisted wire, let out another cry, high and brittle. The mother goat backed off a few paces but didn't run, just watched, taut and silent. The way prey watches something that doesn't quite match any known category. The dog lowered his body, snout nearly touching the ground. He didn't bark, he didn't growl. He simply paused, one paw forward, and stared at the kid until the small thing stopped thrashing. Ada arrived seconds later, boots kicking up wet earth. She knelt, ignoring the cold seeping into her knees, and worked the kid's legs free with slow, practiced movements. The wire had cut shallow grooves into the hide but hadn't broken through. A few more hours and it might have been different. She didn't look at the dog while she worked. Didn't speak, just focused on the small, trembling body and the rhythm of her own breath. When the kid was free, the mother goat rushed in, nostrils flared, nudging her young toward the tree line. They vanished without acknowledgement. No cries, no thanks, no backward glance. The dog remained. His chest rose and fell sharply. His mouth hung open, tongue curled sideways, saliva roping to the grass. Ada stood, brushing grit from her palms. Her gaze fell to the bandana soaked through, stained darker. Now, the knot was slipping. He stepped back from her. Not far, but enough to tell her. That's close enough. She nodded once, out of habit, and turned toward the barn. He followed at a distance, like something that had once belonged to the land. Wasn't sure whether it still did. Inside the barn, the air smelled of rust and mold and wet straw. Light leaked through the roof in narrow stripes. Ada slid the side door open with both hands and let it rest wide. Not a welcome, exactly. Just an absence of closure. The dog entered last. He limped to the old farrowing pen near the back, the one she hadn't used since the sow died 4 winters ago, and lowered himself into the straw with a groan that was not pain but something close to resignation. His body curled, tail tied against his ribs, front paws folded as if trying to keep warmth close. His eyes didn't close. She fetched a bucket of water from the trough and set it near him. He didn't drink, just sniffed it, then turned his head toward the wall. Rain tapped softly against the tin roof. Ada sat across from him, back against a feed bin, arms wrapped loosely around her legs. She didn't try to touch him. She didn't even look at him for long. They simply shared the silence like two old clocks no longer ticking, but not yet broken. At some point she must have fallen asleep. When she woke, dusk was crawling into the rafters. The dog was gone. Panic surged first, sudden, unshaped, then reason. The door was open. He'd left on his own. He would return or he wouldn't. That had always been the agreement, hadn't it? Still, she rose too quickly and nearly slipped. Outside, the fields were quiet. The goat tracks were washed clean. Smoke from the house had settled into a kind of charcoal skin over the earth. She scanned the horizon and saw movement. Not his shape, not the old dog, but something else. Upright human. A boy, maybe 16, standing just beyond the oak stumps near the orchard line. Skinny, clothes strong for the weather, too thin, too clean. His arms hung stiff at his sides. He didn't wave. Ada stepped forward once. The boy didn't move. Then, as if he'd never been there, he turned and disappeared behind the trees. She stood frozen for a moment, unsure if she'd truly seen him. Low rustle came from the barn behind her. She turned. The dog had returned, but he wasn't alone. A second dog, smaller, younger, with one torn ear and a leaner frame, hovered just behind him, cautious, eyes darting. The old dog didn't look at Ada. He moved past her into the barn with no ceremony, limping heavier now, favoring the wrapped leg with a touch of finality. The younger one hesitated, then followed. Ada stepped aside, let them pass. Inside, the air was still warm from earlier. The younger dog sniffed at the straw, circled twice, and settled on the far side of the pen. Not close to the old one, not yet, but not apart either. They didn't touch, but they didn't turn away. Ada watched. From the doorway, her hands were numb again. Somewhere in the dark, a door had opened, not the barn's, something older. And she had the uneasy sense that the fire, all of it, had not started with lightning or accident, but with something forgotten. Some buried thing the old dog had once come to watch over now. Perhaps he had passed it on. The younger dog wouldn't eat at first. He stayed near the corner of the pen, shoulders bunched, paws tucked beneath him as though curling smaller might make him disappear. When Ada brought a tin dish of warm broth and rice the next morning, he didn't move. He didn't growl either, just watched her hands as she set it down and backed away. The older dog lifted his head, sniffed, then rested it again without interest. His leg was worse, swollen now, fur stiff with pus where the bandana had slipped and hardened. Ada considered calling the vet, but the phone line was still dead from the fire, and the thought of putting either dog into the cab of her truck felt wrong. Not unsafe, just wrong. As if the barn was their choice, and to remove them would violate something unspoken. Instead, she filled another bucket with clean water, set it near the farrowing pen, and left the barn door half open. Let them decide. Rain had stopped overnight, but mist still clung to the fields in pale threads. Crows circled low, silent for once, their wings brushing fog as they passed overhead. Ada moved slowly through the wreckage of her routines, feeding what animals remained, checking fences, splitting wood for the stove in the bunkhouse she now slept in. She didn't let herself look for the boy again. If he was real, he'd come back. If not, he wouldn't. By afternoon, the younger dog had eaten half the rice. The old one hadn't moved. Ada sat in the feed room and watched through the slats. The younger dog nosed the dish aside and returned to his corner. His eyes drifted often to the older dog's flank, but he never approached. When Ada rose and stepped into view, he stiffened, not in fear, exactly, but preparation. She didn't move closer, just crouched and poured water into a second dish. A soft thud behind her made her turn. A dead pheasant, half plucked, lay near the barn door. She froze. No tracks, no trail of blood, just the bird, neck twisted, one wing bent, oddly dropped. As if by mistake, Ada stepped forward and studied it. The flesh was still warm. She turned toward the trees. Nothing. The old dog had not moved, but the younger one was watching that evening. Something changed in the old dog's breathing. Shallow now, irregular. Each inhale a slow draw through clenched ribs. When Ada approached, with another bandage soaked in salt water, he didn't resist. He didn't lift his head. His eyes barely opened. She knelt beside him, hand steady despite the cold. As she peeled the soiled wrap away, the wound beneath looked worse than she'd feared. Not deep, but infected, foul-smelling red. The edges pulsed faintly with each breath. She dipped the cloth again, wiped. The dog's body twitched, but he didn't pull away across the pen. The younger dog stood now, head low, tail unmoving. He paced once, then stopped halfway between them. Ada looked up, met his eyes, and he barked just once, short, not threatening, not a warning. Just a single note, like punctuation, as if marking the moment. The old dog's eyes opened. They didn't look at her. They looked at him. For the first time, the younger dog crossed the space. He moved stiffly, like something unused to being seen. When he reached the older one, he didn't nudge or lick. He simply lay beside him, spine touching spine, eyes alert and fixed toward the open barn door. Ada sat back, unsure what she was witnessing. She remained there for a long while, watching the shapes they made together, crooked, quiet, joined not by affection but by something deeper, older. She thought again of the years before the fire, the dog's silent arrivals, a stretch of absence between visits. And then she wondered, not for the first time, how long had there actually been to. Out beyond the barn, dusk had settled into a damp hush. No wind, no birdsong, just the creak of the rafters and the soft breath of sleeping hay. Then, faint, almost imagined a sound from the trees. A cough, short, wet, human. Ada rose quickly, crossed to the barn door, and stepped out. Nothing at first, just the haze of twilight and the rustle of leaves not far off the trailhead. Then movement, a figure at the edge of the orchard, smaller now, the same boy, but thinner, limping. He wasn't alone this time. Beside him something moved, low to the ground, hunched, too steady to be wild. A third dog, older still, heavy-jawed, one eye clouded. Its side moved in time with the boy's breath. They stopped at the edge of the property, just beyond the fence line, and waited. Inside the barn, the old dog gave a soft growl, not of warning, more like recognition. Ada didn't move. Whatever had been set in motion, it had crossed some unseen threshold, and now the line between stray and sentinel, between wild and owed, it had begun to blur. They didn't cross the fence that night. The boy and the third dog stood just beyond it, framed in the silver wash of moonlight, Bodhi's still breath visible in short plumes. Ada remained at the edge of the barn, one hand resting against the worn doorframe, thumb running unconsciously over a groove worn by decades of farmhands, leaning just so. No words were spoken, no gesture made. Just the three of them, too human, one not keeping their distances, like guests unsure their welcome. The older dog had not risen. He lay curled against the younger one, his breath now ragged and uneven, mouth closed but not relaxed. His tail occasionally twitched, as if some old memory was still trying to rise from under the weight of his body. The younger one didn't move, not even when the wind picked up and rattled the rafters above. Ada returned inside. She knelt beside them, brushing straw aside to lay down a square of canvas, worn soft from years under oil drums. She didn't try to lift him, just tucked it beneath so the straw wouldn't cling to his ribs. The younger dog watched her hands but made no protest. Outside, the gate creaked. She stepped out again. The boy was gone. Only the old dog. The third remained now, waiting by the fence. His legs trembled faintly, and his head hung low, but there was something solid in his presence. His clouded eye flicked up as she approached, and for a moment she thought he might bolt. Instead, he sat. Ada opened the gate. The dog didn't move immediately. He waited until she turned her back and walked halfway to the barn before following, not behind her, but wide, like a herding pattern worn into instinct. He entered without hesitation. Inside, the younger dog stood. His ears twitched, his gaze sharp, but the moment passed. The old dog crossed the floor, sat beside the dying one, and lowered his body with the kind of slow grace that suggested he'd done this before for someone else, somewhere else. Ada didn't stay. She stepped out into the cold morning air and let the door fall mostly closed. Mist curled across the pasture now, and a low chorus of frogs had begun along the creek edge. The burned husk of the farmhouse stood quietly in the distance, ribs of timber visible like bones through char. She walked toward it, past the blackened porch posts, the spot where the bell still clung on its hook, half melted. She crouched in the ash and touched a square of tile that had once been her kitchen hearth. Not much else remained. She wasn't thinking of rebuilding. Not yet, maybe not ever. Some places ended themselves, she thought, not in protest, not in accident, but in a quiet falling away. And when they did, it wasn't up to you to restore them. It was up to you to understand why they had stood as long as they did. Back at the barn, morning light spilled under the eaves. Through the narrow gap in the door, she saw all three dogs now lying in a line, old, younger, oldest, not touching, but close enough to sense each other's breath. That was when she understood. The old dog hadn't just appeared those years ago. He'd come from somewhere. He had belonged perhaps briefly to someone, maybe to no one really, maybe just to the land. But he'd arrived not seeking a home, but fulfilling a task. And when that task ended, when the place had burned, when the order of things had unraveled, his body had begun to give out. The younger one hadn't been a stranger. He'd been waiting. The third was not a new arrival, but the past. Before midday, the old dog died. It happened quietly, without strain or sound. Ada didn't witness it directly. She had gone to retrieve another bucket of water, and when she returned, he was still. His eyes were closed, legs folded neatly beneath him, head resting on the canvas as if asleep in the cool of late autumn. The younger dog didn't rise. The third dog, the one with the fogged eye, had shifted closer, his side pressed lightly to the old one's shoulder. His gaze flicked up as Ada entered but didn't linger. There was no cry, no refusal, no search for comfort. Only stillness. She covered the body with a folded horse blanket and sat down in the straw. The two dogs did not move for a long time. That afternoon, she buried him behind the barn near the creek bend, under the ash tree where the goats used to lie in summer. No marker, just turned soil and a ring of stones she placed by hand. The younger dog watched from a distance. The third remained in the barn, his breathing too labored to do more. That night, the mist lifted, stars appeared, sharp, indifferent, beautiful. Ada stood at the fence line and listened to the air shift, to the sound of distant paws crossing. The field behind her. In the morning, both dogs were gone. No tracks, no sound. Just a shallow indentation where they'd lain, one still warm, the other already cool. Ada didn't search. She fed the hens, repaired a section of fence, gathered a fallen branch from the orchard and carved it into a gate latch. Life was not restored, but realigned, made leaner, quieter. She passed the barn often in the days that followed. Sometimes, in the right light, she imagined she could still see paw prints where the straw had been pressed. Other times, she just stood by the door and let the wind move past her, not carrying something away, just lifting what had been left behind.